Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for joining this important side event on the human rights situation in Azerbaijan. My name is Azerbaijan and I will be moderating this side event. A brief reminder that it is prohibited to take pictures or videos unless you have been given permission to. So, we are meeting today because the issue is not historical or peripheral, but it is immediate, expanding and affects the basic guarantees of civic space, free expression, and rule of law in a UN member state. Independent monitors and human rights bodies have documented a dramatic rise in politically motivated detentions. The number of people widely regarded by local and international observers as political prisoners has expanded and is now estimated at nearly 400, representing activists, opposition figures, and ordinary citizens behind bars for simply exercising rights guaranteed under international human rights law. Among those detained are 40 journalists and media workers. But the pattern of repression is not only limited to Azerbaijani nationals. In July 2025, a series of high-profile detentions and raids involving Russian nationals and journalists, including raids on the local office of a Russian state media outlet and arrests of several Russian citizens on serious criminal charges, meaning that non-nationals can also be swept up in politically charged prosecutions. In parallel, the legal environment is tightening. In July 2025, the Parliament adopted several amendments that significantly strengthens controls over the media, therefore expanding definitions of what constitutes a media entity, introducing new registration requirements and heavier fines for non-compliance, criticized as designed to paralyze independent journalism. At the same time, amendments to NGO-related legislation and to laws governing foreign financial flows now restrict how civil society can receive and use foreign funding. Taken together, these legal changes point toward the codification of constraints that will curb independent media and civil society activities for years to come. To shed more light on the situation, I am pleased to now give the floor to our distinguished panelists, starting with Mehman Husseinov. You may have the floor.
Dear colleagues, today I want to draw your attention to the alarming state of media freedom in Azerbaijan. At this moment, around 40 journalists and media workers are in prison on fabricated and politically motivated charges. Most of them are accused of so-called smuggling, but in reality, they are punished for exposing corruption and reporting on electoral fraud. These are not just numbers. These are real people, and let me read their names. Ahmad Mamadli, Ahmad Mukhtar, Akif Gurbanov, Alaskar Mamadli, Ali Zeynalov, Arshad Ibrahimov, Aslan Gurbanov, Aynur Elgüneş, Aysel Umudova, Aytaç Ahmadova, Aziz Orucov, Bəhruz Samadov, Elnara Qasimova, Elnur Şükürov, Farid İsmailov, Farid Mehrazadə, Fatimə Mövlanlı, Hafiz Babalı, İbrahim Hümbətov, İlkin Əmrahov, İmran Əliyev, İqbal Abilov, Xəyal Ağayeva, Məhəmməd Cikalov, Müşfiq Cabbar, Cəmil Məmmədli, Nərgiz Abslamova, Natiq Cavadlı, Nurlan Qəhrəmanlı, Osman Rzayev, Polad Aslanov, Ramil Babayev, Ramil Cəbrəlazadə, Rəşad Ramazanov, Sevinç Vakif qızı, Şəmşad Ağa, Teymur Kərimov, Ülvi Həsənli, Ülviyə Ali, and Cavit Şirəli. Each of these names represents a voice of trust that has been silenced. Each has families waiting, struggling, and suffering because of this injustice. The ruling family of President Ilham Aliyev has been in power for over 30 years and controls nearly every aspect of political and economical life. Independent journalism is seen as a threat, and that's why so many reporters are behind bars. Conditions in detention are extremely harsh. Some journalists have gone on hunger strike. Court trials always follow the same script, despite clear evidence of fabricated charges. Judges hand down identical guilty verdicts. In some cases, journalists have had to defend themselves because lawyers were unavailable or too intimidated to act. Repressions even goes beyond Azerbaijan borders. Journalists are placed on the travel bans. Last year, the exiled blogger and critic Vida Iskandarli was murdered in France. I want to mention that Azerbaijan government carries out this campaign against me, as in past couple of months, I have individually received many death threats. Independent outlets, including the Turan News Agency, have been forced to shut down under political and economical pressure. International broadcasters such as BBC, Voice of America, Radio Liberty have been banned from the country. Access to independent websites is blocked, while social media platforms, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, face grooming restrictions and selective account bans. My TikTok account with a half of million followers also banned in Azerbaijan, only in Azerbaijan. Many independent newsrooms have been forced to close or drastically reduce their work. In Azerbaijan, there is no independent advertising market. Independent media can survive through subscriptions or advertising revenue. Resources are so limited that sometimes families even afford lawyers for journalists already in detention. Those under investigations face both financial and legal blockades, including frozen bank accounts and travel bans. This is why it's urgent to develop a roadmap for supporting Azerbaijan media, especially those operating in exile. Crimes against journalists are almost never investigated in Azerbaijan. Dear delegates, the international community must not remain silent. These journalists are in prison only because they sought to inform society. Their voices are silenced at home, so we must raise our voices here. We call on Azerbaijan to release all journalists jailed on fabricated charges, to end censorship in Azerbaijan, to allow independent media to work freely, and to support exiled Azerbaijani outlets that continue to speak truth the power. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mehman Husseinov, for those important insights. Now let us turn to Diana Nazareth. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Zara, and thanks to all the attendees for being here with us today as we're bringing up a quite concerning and I would say even alarming topic for Azerbaijani civil society. As Mehman has outlined, the plight of media and the journalists in Azerbaijan is dreadful, and unfortunately I must say that CSOs and civil society activists, they face the same situation. In Azerbaijan, non-governmental organizations operate under the general law on public association and funds, which places them under strict control of the Ministry of Justice. NGOs are required to register all grants agreements with the ministry in order to conduct any banking or financial transactions. The ministry also has broad supervisory powers and can issue warnings or suspend activities for even minor violations. As of July 2025, a new presidential decree introduced a system of so-called suspicious financial transactions monitoring. This has created additional burdens for NGOs and further reduced their ability to function independently. Together with limitations on political activities, these rules have made it almost impossible for independent civil society to operate in Azerbaijan. And the situation is deteriorating day by day. The legislation regulating NGOs, media, political parties, and democratic institutions is becoming increasingly restrictive. As a result, today Azerbaijan is facing one of the biggest number of political prisoners, which has increased to 380 people. Among them, the most vulnerable groups are representatives of civil society and independent media, and the most spread charges is so-called money smuggling. I would like to mention a few names of brave human rights defenders and civil society activists who are currently held behind the bars in Azerbaijan. Anar Mamadli is a well-known human rights defender, chair of the Election Monitoring and Democracy Studies Center, and basically a colleague of us, who personally attended a Human Rights Council in March 2024, and as a retaliation, of his work and of the thesis that he presented here in the United Nations office in Geneva, he was arrested just months later upon his arrival back to Baku. Bakhtiar Hadjiyev is a prominent human rights defender arrested in December 2022 and is still being in detention. Roya Abbasov, a colleague of Bakhtiar and a friend. Azar Gasimli, a political analyst, director of the Institute of Political Management, and his colleague Emin Ibrahimov, a former diplomat who criticized systemic corruption and lack of effectiveness in public administration. Rafat Safarov is a well-known human rights activist, director of the Defense Line. He was arrested already for the second time, just one day before he was about to travel to the United States to receive a 2024 Secretary of State Human Rights Defender Award. Iqbal Abilov, a researcher, ethnographer, and Talish scholar who was sentenced to 18 years in prison. He was detained in summer 2024 during a brief visit to his relatives in Azerbaijan, and he is subsequently charged under 3 articles of the Criminal Code, including high treason, solely for his research work on minorities and peaceful views. There is no direct evidence to support the charges, although it is important to highlight that the indictment, which was held in the case of Iqbal, treats ordinary academic and professional context as espionage. For example, it claims that 4 Armenian nationals were following Iqbal's Instagram account, and they find it as a proof of collaboration with Armenian intelligence. In reality, these people were simply his students or research colleagues and in no relations to Armenian intelligence. By this logic, the prosecution is basically saying that every Armenian or Iranian citizen is a spy and that any contact with them might be seen as an espionage. The Court of Appeal will be held on 25 September, just a few days from now, and it will be the first open hearing on his case. We must say that we will be closely monitoring this case, as we find it not important only within Azerbaijan, but also on an international level. Bahruz Samadov is another researcher, a journalist and a PhD student facing similar accusation in treason. These charges allegedly stem from Samadov's research on the use of military forces in Nagorno-Karabakh and connections with Armenian activists. We find it deeply concerning and unjustifiable that the charges of espionage and high treason are still being used, particularly in the context of the peace agreement that was signed in Washington on August 8, 2025, in the presence of the President Aliyev, Prime Minister Pashinyan, and President Trump. Genuine reconciliation requires more than just symbolic gestures and 3 signatures. It must be demonstrated through concrete actions, and this including dropping all politically motivating charges and ensuring the release of all political prisoners. Sustainable peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan cannot be solely rest on high-level agreements, but it also must be translated into meaningful improvements in the daily lives of the people on both sides. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Diana, for your thoughtful remarks highlighting the situation of human rights defenders. I would now like to invite Emin Husseinov, the director of the Institute for Human Rights, to take the floor.
Thank you, Zara. Thank you, dear colleagues, for attending to our side event. As my colleagues previously mentioned, we have very serious issues with journalists, human rights defenders, and other outspoken voices, but it's general today. We have more than 375 political prisoners. It's like some of the human rights groups mentioned for it's more than even 400. As you see, it's already 40 journalists, 10% of all detained political prisoners, it's like journalists, and 9 of them it's brave female journalists with exposed grand corruptions and work for 3 independent media outlets and most of these journalists not only expose courageously these issues with the lack of the governance in Azerbaijan, there are also quite famous journalists. Recently, for example, our colleague Nargiz Absalamova, she received Free Thought Award. Ulvi Hasanli, he's like a shortlisted candidate on Václav Havel Award from the Council of Europe, and many others, like same, all these award winner anti-corruption journalists today supposed to spend their best time of their life in the prison. And unfortunately, no matter how famous you are, you pay the same price. Most of these journalists staying in prison under extreme difficult conditions. Sometimes they are even not able to get simple fence during the hot summer in Azerbaijan. I would like to say also special about prisoners of conscience, because like a significant number of these detained people, it's believers, like most of them represented like Shia communities, and it's like imagine more than 300 people arrested just for simply with fake fabricated charges. In biggest cases, there are people arrested with drug charges. For example, if you're living in the region, you have a beer, like they are arresting you and say you are pro-Iranian, or you have some connection with Iran, even if the land border of Azerbaijan closed since pandemic started and closed until today, especially for pandemic reason. I'm thinking only Azerbaijan will keep its land borders closed with their neighbors. These people arrested with fabricated charges, and Azerbaijani government use these numbers of the cases in their negotiation with the Western communities to saying, look, we have a trace from Iran, we have like 300 potential Iranian spies. Of course, we are not able to arrest them with spy or treason charges because it's difficult to provide the proofs, but we have a serious threats, and that's why sometimes the government of Azerbaijan managed to get some kind of informal agreement with like-minded states to say, many people not speaking about these political prisoners, because they say, okay, they are not famous journalists, they are not work from like NGOs or media institutions which is cooperate with Western donors, etc. But our role is speaking also about them, because most of them simply staying by years without even any kind of legal support. Their families survives in the very extremely difficult financial pressure. They even sometimes don't have money to pay for their visits, visited them in prison, because some of these arrested prisoners of conscience living in the remote areas of Azerbaijan. My colleague Zara mentioned in the beginning about issues with the foreigners. I would like to highlight this recent development, what we have in Azerbaijan related with detention of 8 Russian citizens. Most of them is people who left Russia after February 2024, when war between Russia and Ukraine started. Today, as you see on the pictures, clear evidences on the pictures, like for example behind bars, like some people, for example Anton Drachov, entrepreneur, which is quite successful IT entrepreneur, he's arrested with smuggling charges. It's third one, with the 2 tampons on his nose. It's like because they are preventing to stop bleeding his nose, probably is extremely tortured. Sergei Safronov, another guy, which is also 23 years IT entrepreneur. He is also arrested with drug smuggling charges. It's alarming for Azerbaijan start to do this quite openly. If you look to this photo, probably you will see in the YouTube when in Salvador, there's some people detained on exactly the same style, but the Azerbaijani government do this public actions, especially to show to the Russian government, but look, you do something wrong with our citizens, because just few weeks before, Russian law enforcement agencies, including FSB, start unprecedented crackdown against Azerbaijani diaspora representatives in whole Russian territory, especially in city Yekaterinburg. During all of this pressing campaign, they try to detain several, as like Russian law enforcement agencies said, organized crime group members. And imagine during detention operation, 2 persons magically died. That's what Russian government and investigative committee and FSB reported. For 2 persons from detained group somehow died because they have issues with their heart. Like it's Gusein and Ziadin Safarov, 2 brothers. They arrested 7 brothers, and 2 of them died. And when these bodies of these detained and murdered under torture Azerbaijans delivered to Azerbaijan, their relatives said, for it's lots of evidences clear and barbaric tortures on their bodies. And even like Azerbaijani prosecutor opened criminal case on the torture and death under torture charges. President Aliyev also said Azerbaijan observed these evidences, and this murder case clearly shows for 2 persons not died, as like Russians said, on issues with their heart problem. They died because they are murdered. But what Azerbaijan do? Azerbaijan exactly do the same. They are not killed, like for example, Russian citizens in Azerbaijan, but they are just publicly punish them, extremely beat and torture 8 young guys, and accuse them with the drug charges. And as I said, these 8 Russians right now staying in condition of the hostages. When Azerbaijani government tried to punish Russian partners, unfortunately simple Russians must pay this huge price. And that's why we believe for these 8 persons, they're also Azerbaijani political prisoners. And we address several times publicly to Azerbaijani law enforcement agencies for everyone who is responsible for this shameful torture and shameful detention operation supposed to be punished. But we understand the realities of Azerbaijan. We hope for soon the lawyers of these detained Russians, they are able to apply for the European Court for Human Rights, at least with 2 articles, with Article 5 and Article 3. And we will see how this case will develop. But the case with these 8 people remind us another extremely serious case of the Tartar case, when hundreds of people arrested with spying and treason accusations, and 11 Azerbaijani citizens, and some of them servicemen, murdered under the torture. Like it's not means for now President Aliyev criticized Russian FSB for their kill two Azerbaijanis in Yekaterinburg in this summer, just 2.5 months ago. Unfortunately, President Aliyev never punished Azerbaijani military prosecutor who's responsible for murder of 11 Azerbaijani servicemen with a fake espionage and treason charges. Thanks for Council of Europe and Council of Europe Special Rapporteur on Torture, who's able to expose of this mass torture scandal related with the Tatar case. But for us, unfortunately, it's difficult as like civil society each time to fight with state officials who is absolutely weaponized and able to do whatever they want against innocent people. And no matter which nationality you are, if anyone, like a foreigner or stateless person in Azerbaijan, punish for no reason, without any kind of even judgment and proof of his crime, I think this kind of shameful practice must be stopped. If you're interested in these cases, we have prepared some materials. We're able to, right after our side event, give these names and brief pictures regarding these issues. Just what I would like to say, all of these people under extreme torture during the first 2 days are supposed to accept these fake fabricated drug charges against them. And under this extreme torture, they give testimonies against their own, which is clearly said for government don't have any kind of even proofs, like this successful IT entrepreneurs, which is don't have any kind of even agenda with any kind of fake or illegal businesses, especially with drug businesses. They're just like a punish because they're Russians and they're escaped from the war. They don't want to be in Russia because everyone knows for most of these IT entrepreneurs supposed to leave Russia because otherwise they have issues to go to the military service or put themselves to another trouble. And these people who are supposed to be at least natural, on the natural countries, they try to find themselves like peaceful and secure countries, and unfortunately in Azerbaijan they are now supposed to be as like hostages. Many our colleagues also sometimes ask us about issues with Armenian prisoners of the war, because today all of these court cases against Armenians who was detained during the operation of Azerbaijani militaries in Karabakh, during these deliberation operations. As Azerbaijan don't have any kind of independent court system, personally, I'm like Azerbaijani don't believe for Azerbaijani courts, which has investigated cases of these detained Armenians, able to make fair decision on these people's cases. Of course, for publicly named like a political prisoners, these people must be saying, for we would like to name ourselves as well as like political prisoners. Unfortunately, we're not able to contact with the relatives of these Armenian detained prisoners of the war. But for me, as I'm a human rights defender, which was supposed to remotely even observe this court process, it's not court, it's like unfortunately one-way legal battle, which is what we observe from the public TV or Azerbaijani TV propagandas, shows us for if Azerbaijani government really wants fair trial on these people, which is they are incriminated against them high military crimes, as like a genocide and others, Best options for the future in cases like this, I think Azerbaijan is supposed to cooperate with international courts on the same scenario what post-Yugoslavic states do this with their own stories when they punish these military crimes responsible. So with Azerbaijani case today, especially right after when Azerbaijan and Armenian leadership managed to sign peaceful framework in Washington on 8 August 2025, when President Trump hosted Nikol Pashinyan, Prime Minister of Armenia, and President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev. After all of this, like a positive development between two states with American support, I think Azerbaijan and Armenia must find solutions to stop this shameful practice. Arrest, for example, academicians like Bahruz Samadov or Iqbal Abilov, who is arrested with treason accusations with no reason, just like Azerbaijan Minister of National Security just need to report for, look, we are fined two Armenian spies, and they are arrested two researchers. One of the researchers just working on research with the national minorities, Turkish national minorities, Iqbal Abilov, and another one is like journalist and researcher, Bahruz Samadov. Just because the philosophy of Azerbaijani government making enemies, some enemies to show inside the countries for, look, if you are peace activist, like a Bahruz Samadov, you are able to arrest it with espionage charges as like him. There is signal to all other peace activists for, guys, this is not your business calling for peace. Peace is the business of Ilham Aliyev or Nikol Pashinyan. That is the logic of Azerbaijan government. But after all of this agreement, I think government of Azerbaijan is supposed to find a political will and stop this practice to punish people under this serious charges as like a treason. And we must find new practical solutions for Armenians and for Azerbaijanis. We need to find solution for all detained people. Of course, like we can say it's something for Armenia also detained just 2 weeks ago one Armenian diplomat. She's working as like consular in Vienna, if I'm not mistaken, and she's detained in Armenia as like a Azerbaijani spy, which is also sounds for us as like quite parallel cases with what Azerbaijani government do with researchers, Armenian government do with their diplomats, and because the diplomats she have relations with Azerbaijani man in Vienna, they find some kind of connection. Potentially, she's able to be spy. So, but we would like to say in Azerbaijan, all of these cases when people arrested with serious crimes, accusations as like a drug dealing, smuggling, as like a, imagine like a journalist which is exposed, Hafiz Babali, one of the famous anti-corruption journalists, which is exposed dozens of billions corruptions, which is connected with high-level officials. And this guy arrested with the smuggling charges, and government of Azerbaijan, especially just a few days ago on his birthday on 9th of September, give him like a birthday gift, like appeal court decision for the appeal court confirm for this journalist, because he received like 500 euro fees for his investigative story as like freelance journalist from Abzats Media. He's punished with this smuggling charges, like 9 years, just for receiving 500 euro salaries. And the government of Azerbaijan saying for this person do biggest corruptional crimes, like receives these salaries. But people who's really responsible for grand corruptions, they are staying complete in a white like impunity. They're doing whatever they want, as like Mehman said, for President Aliyev, and his family controlled all social and economic life. And just like small example, months ago, President Aliyev and his daughters, they are buying like a hotel in Turkish Bodrum court, and all Turkish media published this story for the assets, like which is they're buying 5-star hotels, Mandarin Plaza in Bodrum. This price is of this hotel, which is president of Azerbaijan family paid it for this. It's more than €500 million. But journalist which has received €500 salary for his anti-corruption, and who is exposed to this grand corruption, punished with the smuggling charges. I would like to stop here, and if we have a Q&As or if moderator want to ask about some specific cases. And
please do not hesitate. Yes.
Association for Human Rights Advocacy in Geneva. We have been created to defend victims of the Turkish government, mainly, but not only, those members of the Gulen movement. I have two short questions, if you allow me. I would like to know whether you have been victims of reprisals and harassment here in the Palais des Nations or outside as defenders of the human rights in Azerbaijan, because as you know there are tools in favor of your cause that you can use in case you have been victims of harassment, and because you know the sensitive situation in your country. The other question is, I wonder if you have been following the process of the Declaration on Human Rights Defenders, which involves, of course, journalists and human rights defenders as such. It's a good and important tool. We, as NGO, we use it, and it has some impact in some governments to defend our human rights defenders, human rights as defenders. Thank you very much.
Just 1 second. Okay. Related with cases or threats after participation on events like this, first of all, I would like to say we invited several of our colleagues from Azerbaijan to attend to these events, and even if we have small funding for this, some of our colleagues, unfortunately, are relatives of these detained prisoners of conscience and political prisoners, kindly reject our invitation because they say we're afraid to speak publicly in this event. Even they're already paid some price. Some of them have, for example, travel, but they're not able to attend technically. But those who's able to attend, they say we are afraid, and especially when human rights defenders like Anar Mammadli, famous human rights defenders, attend on event during, if I'm not mistaken, 15th of March 2024, organized by Human Rights House Foundation. Weeks later, when he returned back to Azerbaijan, he is arrested again for his human rights activism, and especially for these events which he's attending here in Geneva. And these events, it's like a part of this raising awareness campaign during this chairmanship of Azerbaijan in 2020, when Azerbaijan have host country status for COP29. And just like if person like Anar or others who's attended for the Council of Europe's side events or Human Rights Council side events or speaking here or participating on bilateral meetings with diplomats, when they return back to Azerbaijan, they're easily punished again with the same charges, for example, which is Anar punished in 2013. Imagine other people just twice thinking, should they attend to such kind of events or not? And that's why all of our colleagues who live now in Azerbaijan decide to do not attend to any kind of public discussions. And sometimes even like the colleagues who live in exile, it's also, we have lots of human rights activists who lives here in France, in Germany, in Berlin, and we said to them, for guys, should you able to attend to the events? Some of them again say for like maybe now it's not best momentum because we have relatives in Azerbaijan or some friends who is able to receive additional punishment by Azerbaijani government. That's why with us again, as like Mehman said, each of us receiving some kind of online threats here. Sometimes when we receive serious threats, we're reporting to Swiss police or another law enforcement responsible agencies. But again, biggest threats received our colleagues who live in Azerbaijan or sometimes attending to events like this, and just to prevent this risk, we decided to organize this panel with small numbers of presenters who already live outside of Azerbaijan.
Thank you for your question. In addition to what Min said, we also were subjected to digital threats and attacks on our website and our emails. And our website is blocked in Azerbaijan. Additionally to Mehman's TikTok page, which is like almost 1.5 million followers, is taken down in Azerbaijan. So yeah, we are subjected to some kind of retaliation. And as in regards to your second question, definitely we have resorted to UN special procedure mandate holders, and we followed up them and the UN diplomats. But as of today, we haven't seen any kind of will from the government to improve the situation, and they decline any kind of allegations in regards to political prisoners. The authorities claim that there is no political prisoners in the country, and all the people who are detained, they face the charges like very truthfully, like they're guilty, and that's why they serve the sentence. So we've been doing a lot in this regard, but unfortunately the result is not there yet.
Thank you very much for your question. Are there any? You may have the floor.
Hi, thanks. Dave Ellsford from Human Rights House Foundation. And just to maybe reiterate, first of all, thank you for organizing this. Azerbaijan, of course, is not on the formal agenda of the Council, but I think opportunities like this to highlight human rights violations and trends in Azerbaijan remains very important. Just to reiterate, I think something that the speakers had mentioned, which of course is the case of Anar Mammadli, prominent election monitoring advocate and human rights defender in Azerbaijan, who participated in a side event that my organization hosted here at the Council and was subsequently arrested and detained after his return to Azerbaijan. And of course, we reiterate your calls for his release. Maybe a question for the panelists, and Emin had I think alluded to this a little bit in his remarks as well, but maybe to ask you to expand, and that is, how would you assess how like-minded states, the European Union, others are balancing human rights concerns inside of Azerbaijan with other foreign policy objectives they have vis-a-vis the Azerbaijani government? I'm thinking of energy policy and so forth. And to what extent do you see human rights conditionality reflected appropriately or adequately in the work of those states and their engagement with the Azerbaijani authorities. So, yeah, thanks again.
Thanks, Dave, for your question. So related with balancing between these topics, if before like-minded, especially European Union members, try to engage with Azerbaijan and speak sometimes on issues related with strategic agreement, preparing of strategic agreement between EU and Azerbaijan. Right now we didn't hear any development on these directions, but new trends is like a peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's like change also agenda quite seriously. Right now EU diplomats in Azerbaijan during their conversations with small numbers of local human rights defenders saying for now it's maybe time and more useful to think about like finding real peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia and don't provoke a leave with these topics as like democracy, lack of the state of democracy and civil freedoms, which is for us is make our job and efforts more complicated because and especially another issues like a US administration new agenda, especially Trump's administration agenda when he cut all of the programs supported traditionally Azerbaijani civil society in relations with the civil freedoms. Right now we have the hope maybe Americans also start engage with the civil society on directions of this peace framework between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and our role is, I think, we're not able to change their mind, especially Americans, and it's super complicated stakeholder today, and even like the European Union not able to find a deal with Mr. Trump. But as like Azerbaijan civil society representative, I think it's quite practical for us starting to use this peaceful agenda to promoting another components for the peace, like which is I'm pretty sure for democracy, rule of law, freedom of expression, and other freedoms. You can find as like Diana mentioned, real peace if you don't respect these important democratic and rule of law tools. So with European Union again, European Union today somehow able to provide temporary relocation for Azerbaijani civil society representatives who decide to leave the country. But in reality, they say, as I'm here, they're not able to do anything in relations of support of the civil society efforts or independent media. If before, for example, like for the last 3 years, we observed for EU try to develop EU for independent media programs. Today, what I'm here for, EU decide to do not do this kind of activities. They say they have a new agenda, EU for peace. So it's now for us again, we should also correlate our steps and make them closer for this kind of agenda and new realities. Which is we still believe that Azerbaijan able to find real peace with Armenia, it's definitely sooner or later positively affected to situation in our region. But it's supposed to be real peace, not just like peace or illusions which is someone tried to create for themselves. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the last document that we have seen in regards to the gas and human rights was the decision of European Parliament adopted in October 2024, as you may already aware of, right? And it clearly says that, and I quote, EU calls for the EU to end its reliance on gas exports from Azerbaijan, and it says that any future partnership agreement between the EU and Azerbaijan be made conditional on the release of all political prisoners, implementation of legal reforms, and overall improvement of human rights situation. So basically, it's been there, it's been declared, but it's for us to judge whether it's been implemented or not. So we'll see how it goes.
Thank you very much. We still have a bit of time, so if there is anyone else that has a question, you are welcome to have the floor. If not, I will ask a question myself. It's a question for you, Emin. In Azerbaijan, there has been cases where courts have been holding trials in absentia for people who are already exiled and who are living abroad. Would you be able to tell me more about these cases and what message do these trials send to these journalists and activists and civil society members?
That's very interesting new trends. We never observed for the last 30 years such kind of public court threats actions, which is government of Azerbaijan established since I think March 2025. What they start to do, we have up to 12 exile-based outspoken journalists, bloggers, whistleblowers, or former government members, or diplomats like Arif Mammadov, Azerbaijani whistleblower and diplomat was reported on this covered diplomacy case. For example, prosecutor of Azerbaijan established via public TV, broadcasted publicly invitation for this person. They said, for example, this Arif Mammadov, according to new Azerbaijani law, via public TV and public news agency, we are inviting you after 2 months voluntarily participate in upcoming court process on accusation with these criminal charges against you. And of course, this person never attending for this court process. And after this, they are doing this court without this person. And court decides, okay, this person accused with serious charges. For example, threats against state national interest or something like this, and he's arrested for 10 years or 12 years. It's like a different scenarios. Several bloggers, one of the bloggers, Imamaddin Alimanov, living in France, already 4 years, for example. Court case happened, same court case, decide to arrest him for the 7 years, just for the simple case because this person have a YouTube channel, and during this YouTube channel he's organized podcasts, interviews about human rights violations, issues with the electoral fraud, etc. And government of Azerbaijan start to use this kind of new legal court processes against outspoken voices. They try to, the same stuff, for example, Russian government doing already with Russian journalists, but that's what happened in Azerbaijan is something new. Again, it's, if anyone, we're supposed to finish our side event in 5 minutes, I think. We're able to give this information to you. We have full list of these persons, like entrepreneurs, like for example, a very famous entrepreneur who is participated in story related with grand corruption when he's reported how he delivered, he's obliged to deliver dozens of millions bribe for get construction contracts. It's Ilgar Hadjiyev. It's a whistleblower which is providing information for all independent Azerbaijani journalists. Some of journalists which has published their materials now punished and spent time, unfortunately, in Azerbaijani prison. But this person living in USA when he's have an asylum status seeker, and person which is reported how he get like dozens, millions bribes to Azerbaijani high-level officials, including assistant of the president of Azerbaijan and head of the presidential administration. Prosecutor office opened criminal case not against officials, which is reported about their corruption. They opened case against him, and now they're asking like USA for bring this guy back. We already have court decision regarding him. So this kind of new threats, which is potentially government able to do this also against me or Mehman or anyone else who speak up related with the problems. But again, it's most vulnerable people now. For example, as I say, for these Russians, as like Anton Drachov or Sergei Safronov, imagine like their family lives in Russia, not able to visiting their family members, again, no matter who you are in Azerbaijan, if you are a successful entrepreneur, you are expat who's supposed to find like peace for yourself in Azerbaijan, unfortunately nobody free and safe, and sometimes we are just simply saying for Azerbaijan, feel me like a big prison. Like we have 400 political prisoners inside the prisons and 10 million outside who feel themselves as like a 10 million prisoners who live in the big prison, which is named Azerbaijan. And we address it again to Azerbaijani government, release all of these innocent people and start to think about real reforms with rule of law and democracy in Azerbaijan.
So we have 4 minutes left. I will end this side event. I would like to thank you very much for your attendance, and I wish you a very good day.